Hello everyone, welcome to this little tutorial. This tutorial was requested by one of my viewers, so if you want to see a tutorial topic you want to see covered, then just leave a comment in the comment section below and I will see if I can make a video. So in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make this little Resident Evil style camera system. So let's go into play mode and see what we're going to do. So as you can see, we can walk around, and if I walk into this trigger box right here, the camera switches and we have this new viewpoint on our character, and if I walk back you can see the camera switches again. So I will see you after the intro. Okay, so let's start by creating a new project. So I'm going to call my project Resident Evil Camera, and then you have to change the location where you want to save your project. Make sure that it is set to 3D and not to 2D. So if the 2D is in this color, change it to the 3D. And we're going to import the characters package. So click on here, click on characters, and then click done, and then create a project. And Unity will take a moment, and then it will open up a new project. Okay, so now Unity has opened up, and we are inside of the Unity editor. Let's start by creating a few folders. So right click and create a new folder. And I'm going to call it scripts. I'm also going to create another folder. I'm going to call it prefabs. And I'm going to create one more folder, which is going to be called materials. Okay, so let's start by setting up the scene. So right click in the hierarchy, create new 3D object cube. And this is going to be our floor. I'm going to set its Y size to 0.1, and then I'm going to make it 20 by 20. Then I'm going to grab the camera right here, and I'm going to move it into position, and I'm also going to rotate it. So I'm going to do something like this. Of course you can take more time and place the camera so how you like it. I'm just going to make it quick, and then I'm going to call this camera not main camera but instead only camera, and then I'm going to duplicate it. And I would highly recommend that you name your cameras in a more descriptive way. So let's say this is the camera in the kitchen. If you have, for example, something like the first Resident Evil game, and you have a kitchen room, then I would call this camera kitchen, and this one would be then camera hallway 1 or something like this. Make it more descriptive than just camera and camera 1. Because later on, when your project will become big, you will get confused, and so it's very important that you, especially in the beginning, keep everything very descriptive and organized. So that's also the reason why we made this folders right here. Okay, so let's finish up with this camera here. Okay. And now I go to the standard assets folder and go to the characters, and then I'm going to go to the third person characters, prefabs, and then I'm going to grab the third person controller right here. I'm going to drag it into the scene, and let's first disable camera 1 right here and go into play mode. So as you can see, we can move around and everything is working. So now that we know that everything is working, we can start adding the scripts, but first I'm going to save the scene. So Control S to save the scene, and then just call it however you like, but I'm going to call mine scene_main. And then I'm going to save it. So you can see there's a scene I just created. And now we have to add one more thing. So create an empty object. Make sure it's not a child of something, as I had just a second ago. And call this game manager. It's always good to have something like a game manager. It's basically an invisible game object which only is there to have some scripts on it. Like for example the camera manager we're going to add, or if you have for example a shooter and you want to keep track of the score or the kills, it's always good to have something like this game manager object right here to put those scripts on. Okay, and now we have to define a tag. So go to tag and add tag, click on this little plus icon and give it the name game manager, and then tag it like this. You will see why this is important in just a second. And now we can finally start to add our scripts. So create a new C# script, and the first script we're going to write is going to be the camera manager. Double click on it and open it up and wait for Visual Studio to open up. Okay, so now Visual Studio has opened up. And let's first start by defining a few variables. We're just going to need two actually. So let's start by first writing public game object. And now we're going to declare an array. This is why there are those brackets right here. It is important to have those two brackets, because again we are declaring an array. And what an array is, it's basically a container, or it's a variable which can store multiple values. This sounds complicated, but it's actually quite easy, and you will see in just a second what it does. So public game object, I'm going to call it cameras. And now if I save it and go back to the editor and to the game manager and attach the script, you can see that we have this drop down menu, and I could put in, for example, the size of 4, and you can see I can put in 4 game objects in here. Okay, so I'm just going to set it to 0 again, and now I go back into the script. And now the next thing I need is a public game object, and this time it's only a variable, so we don't need those two brackets. So public game object start camera. So what this is, it's basically going to contain all cameras we have in the whole scene, and this here is going to be the camera the game will start out with. So what we're going to do in just a second is we will turn off all cameras, and then we're going to turn on the camera which we will need in the beginning of the game. So let's start with adding this. So first we are going to say cameras is equal to game object dot find game objects with tag. Make sure that it is game objects with an S right here, so it's plural. And then we're going to search for the tag camera. And then what we're going to do is we write for int I is equal to 0, semicolon, I is smaller than camera, cameras dot length semicolon I++. So what this means is basically we are making a new integer called I. This is just a counter, and then we are going to execute the code as many times as I is smaller than the length of the camera array. So let's say we have three cameras in our scene. Then the camera array would have a length of 3. So we would execute the script inside of here 3 times. And then we're going to increment I by 1. And then we say cameras, brackets, and then I. So basically we are looping through this array right here. And we're going to do something with the current camera we have in the loop. So the current camera dot set active and then false. So semicolon. So what this does, it turns off all cameras in the scene. So all cameras will start out turned off. And then what we're going to do after the loop is finished, we're going to say start camera dot set active true. So what this means is we turn off all cameras, and then we're going to turn on this the camera which will be the first camera in our game. And yeah, so we don't need the void update right here. So let's delete it and instead write public void deactivate all cameras, and then we are going to copy this for loop right here and paste it. And what we're going to do is basically whenever we switch the camera, we are going to call this right here, which will then deactivate all cameras in the scene. Okay, so now that we have written this script, we are going to add another script. So we are going to create a new C# script, and we're going to call this camera trigger. And let's double click on this script. And let's start by first, of course, declaring the variables. So we need a public game object. Okay, for some reason IntelliJ is not working. So public game object my camera. And then we're going to need a private camera manager, my camera manager. And then in the void start, we are going to make the reference to my camera manager. So my camera manager is equal to game object dot find game object with tag. So at this time we are only looking for one game object, so make sure that this is game object without an S. So game object with tag game manager dot get component, and then we need those two and brackets and a semicolon, and in here we're going to write the name of the component we want to look for. So we want a reference to the camera manager, and then save this. And now we also don't need the void update in here. Instead we're going to write void on trigger enter collider other, and then if other dot compare tag, and this tag is player, then we're going to say my camera manager dot deactivate all cameras, and my camera dot set active true. Oops, semicolon after the bracket. So what this code does is whenever we walk as the player, so right here, when we walk inside of the trigger, we are going to attach this grip2. Then this trigger will first deactivate all cameras, so we will execute this method right here. And after all cameras have been deactivated, we are going to activate the camera which is applied to this trigger. So how are we going to set this up? It's actually quite easy. So let's go back into Unity and right click and create a 3D object, and I'm going to create a cube. Oops. And I'm going to set it to 111 and bring it up a little bit. And then go to the box collider and make sure that it is set to isTrigger. What you would basically do now is you would delete the cube mesh filter and the mesh renderer. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to right click in the materials folder and create a new material. So where is it? Right here. And I'm going to call it trigger and change it to transparent, change the color to red and bring the alpha down, and then apply it to the cube. And then I'm going to grab the cube, which I'm going to call camera trigger. And then I'm just going to scale it up. You would, if you would make an, let's say, Resident Evil kind game, then you would just place it in a door or around a corner or something like this. But I'm going to place it here. And then I'm going to add the component, scripts, and here you can see here's our camera trigger script. And this is going to be the trigger for camera 1. And then I'm going to duplicate this trigger right here, bring it over here, and then I'm going to put in camera 1 instead. Also make sure that all the cameras are set to active. Okay. And now there's one last thing we have to do. So we have to grab camera 1 and add a new tag. Click on this little plus icon and call this tag camera. And we're going to grab camera 1 and the camera right here and change their tags to camera. And then we have to go to the game manager and set the start camera to camera 1 right here. So now let me check one more thing. Make also sure that your player is tagged as player, because otherwise the script won't work. So let's test it out. You can see we start out with this camera active, and now if I walk into the second trigger, you can see the second camera gets activated and the other one is deactivated. And if I walk into the other trigger again, it changes. So now the Resident Evil style camera is finished, and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please leave a like if you did, and also consider subscribing for more tutorials. And yeah, so don't forget to smile, and until next time, bye guys.